Okay, we are live.
Oh, we're live.
Yay!
Are there
Hi,
people
everyone.
there? Hi.
I think there are some people. Hello, world.
Hello, people.
So,
People.
so we thought we would play a little bit of children's literature trivia while we wait for people to get in and settled. And anybody watching can feel free to comment with their answers. We'll see who is a true aficionado. But really, it's Supriya and Mae who are going to be on the spot here.
Horrible at trivia, so I'm just going to say that right now.
I'm good at quizzes about chocolate, but I'll see how I do here.
Ooh, if only I had a Charlie and the Chocolate Factory question.
Oh.
But alas. Okay, are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. We're gonna start off with one that I hope is an easy one.
Oh, no.
What beloved children's character lives in an old house in Paris that was covered in vines?
Madeline?
Yes!
Oh, yeah!
I was going to give you the clue that it rhymed with vines, but you didn't need it. Okay, let's see.
That was when I was growing up in our school library. That's the book that everyone wanted to check out. And then as I got older, it was Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. And that's the one that all the girls wanted to check out.
Yes.
Yeah, I think there was something about like the image of the girls walking in their like line with like two girls that it was just like very soothing and appealing to my early childhood.
Their hats.
Yeah.
Okay, here's a slightly trickier one. Okay, this one's multiple choice. From 1930 to 2003, there were 175 books in the original Nancy Drew Mystery Stories series. How many of these were actually written by Carolyn Keene? Was it 55, none, 1, or 101?
That's a good question. I'm going to guess 55.
I was going to say that too, but I'll say 101.
Ooh, you are both incorrect.
Oh
no. How many did she write?
So actually there was no Carolyn Keene. She was not a real person.
Oh.
It was just a pseudonym. Nancy Drew was one of the first series that was like a syndicated series that was created by a book packager. So there were a bunch of different authors that wrote under her name, but no Carolyn Keene. I feel like I probably just like crushed some people's like childhoods, and I'm really sorry.
And how many of them were female versus male authors? Do we know?
Ooh, that's a good question. I do not think all of them were female, but I don't know off the top of my head.
I'm gonna look that up, and then we're gonna announce it on Twitter.
Do it.
Yeah.
Also, according to our tech guy, my husband Aki, how many people? 3 people got the first question right?
Oh, are people commenting?
Second one.
And 3 people got the second one right.
Wow.
Geniuses. All right, so it's just 5 o'clock, so we can do a couple more. Well, give people time to log on. Okay. In the year 2000, the New York Times began a separate bestsellers list for children's books. What caused the paper to make this decision?
Harry Potter?
Yeah.
Harry Potter.
Yeah. I think that was the year that the 4th Harry Potter book came out. And so it was taking up 4 spots on the bestseller list. And all of the adult authors who were used to being on the bestseller list were like, no, this can happen no more. She's taking up too many of our spots.
And it's still taking up those 10 spots.
Yeah, just on the children's list now. Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was cool. Okay. What city does the picture book Make Way for Ducklings by Robert McCloskey take place in? Give you a hint. It's an East Coast city.
New York.
Close. Even colder.
Older. Someplace where ducks hang out, right?
3 people got Harry Potter.
Nice. 3 people got Harry Potter too.
Oh, wow.
Oh, nice.
Boston? I don't know.
Yeah, you got it. Boston.
Oh.
All right.
Yeah. I think there's even like a little statue there of all the ducklings crossing the street.
Oh, wow.
Too. Yes. Let's see. Let's do one more and then we'll get started.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Let me do a good one. Okay. What classic children's novel starts with the following line? "Where's Papa going with that axe?" said Fern to her mother as they were setting the table for breakfast.
I think I know.
Say it.
Oh, May, do you know, or do you want?
You go.
Okay, Charlotte's Web.
Yes, you got
Oh,
it.
yeah. Okay, I'm horrible at trivia. I just freeze up.
Well, I had an unfair advantage in that I wrote the question. So.
Well, it's a little bit past our start time, so I think we'll go ahead and start. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
So welcome everyone. We are so excited to be here and very grateful that you are all taking time out of your day. And really quickly, my name is Mae Respicio and I am zooming from the Bay Area. And where are you both right now?
I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina, where it was 90 degrees today.
Oh, wow.
Wow. I'm in Metro Detroit in Michigan. It is not 90.
And for those of you watching at home, just drop us a little comment and tell us what state you're in and what your name is. So we, a few weeks ago, Ali, Supriya, and I were talking about, it's kind of a weird time to be releasing a book in the pandemic. So we thought, let's celebrate together. It's always so much more fun to do this with friends. And so we're thankful to be here and with all of you friends watching from wherever you're watching. At the very end, we're going to do a giveaway. And so the way we're going to do that is if you can comment on your favorite book. It can be any book, any genre, or even just what book you want to read or what book you're reading. We want to pass along the book love. And at the very end, we are going to literally put those in a hat, I think, and draw 3 names, and 3 people are going to win a book. So we're going to remind you to do that throughout the whole thing. But yeah, we're just going to keep this really informal, and we have a couple games planned. And I think we're going to start with introductions. So Supriya, do you want to start?
Yeah. So my name is Supriya Kelkar, and I am the author of American as Paneer Pie, which comes out on June 9th. And this book is the story of Lekha, who's the only Indian American kid in her small town in Michigan. And Lekha feels like she has 2 versions of herself. So she has home Lekha, who loves watching Bollywood films and eating Indian food, and school Lekha, who puts her hair over her bindi birthmark and avoids confrontation at all costs, especially when she's being teased for her culture. And when a racist incident rocks her small town, Lekha has to decide whether she's going to continue to remain silent or find her voice before it's too late. So it's a book full of hope and empowerment, and it's timely in an election year, and I'm really proud of it, and I hope all of you enjoy it.
Great, thank you. Ali, do you want to go next?
Yeah, and I just want to say I was able to get to read an early version of Supriya's book, and it really is wonderful, and you should be really proud, Supriya.
Thank you.
So my name is Ali Standish, and my book is How to Disappear Completely. It came out April 28th, and it's about a girl named Emma living in the small town of Lanternwood. And at the beginning of the book, Emma is really struggling because her grandmother has just passed away. And her grandmother is not only a family member, but is also her best friend and her support system, and someone who really filled her world with magic. And in addition to that, when she goes to Graham's funeral, she looks down and she sees a spot, like a white spot on her toe, where her skin is much paler than the rest of her skin. And she keeps seeing these spots in the following days, and she is soon diagnosed with vitiligo. Vitiligo is a real skin condition. It's very common. About 1 in 100 people have it. It's not contagious. It's not dangerous, but it does change your appearance a lot. There's celebrities who have it. There's actors and ballerinas and even a supermodel, Winnie Harlow. but it can be really hard to adjust to knowing that your skin is going to be 2 different tones and that it's going to look different to and different from most other people's skin. So my husband was diagnosed with vitiligo in 2017, and now it's like just an everyday part of our life. We don't think about it that much, but at the time, his skin was changing really rapidly, and it was really scary for him not to have control over his appearance or to know what he was going to look like from one week to the next, or how people were going to respond to that. And I thought, if it was that challenging for an adult to deal with, what would it be like for someone who is Emma's age, who's 12? So as Emma is dealing with these things, she is dealing with some bullying at school. Fortunately, she finds a really great, bubbly, outgoing best friend named Fina who helps her through. And then the other way she processes is by writing. So she and Graham have this special place that's actually represented on this beautiful cover in the woods called the Spinney. And it's a magical place deep in the forest, and they're the only 2 people who know about it. And they keep this journal in the hollow of this big sycamore tree. And together they write stories about the magical creatures that they encounter in this secret wood. So Emma will write a chapter, and then Graham, and then Emma, until the story is done. And after Graham dies, Emma goes back to the Spinney and she decides that she's going to start writing one more story. And she doesn't know if she's going to be able to finish it. Obviously, Graham isn't there to help her, but she just knows that she needs to use writing as a way to escape her fears and her anxieties. So she goes and she starts the story, and she comes back a few days later, and the journal is not exactly where she left it. And when she opens it, she sees that somebody else has written the next chapter. So part of the mystery of the story that she and Fina have to solve together is who is writing to her, who knew about this secret place and why. And it's through solving that mystery that Emma is able to find a way to connect with her Graham, even though her Graham is gone, and to understand her struggle in a different way. And maybe not even as a struggle, but as a source of strength. So also a hopeful book. There's some mystery elements, there's some magic elements. So I hope there's a little something for everyone there. And what about you, Mae?
Yeah, both of your books I'm so excited to read. So my book just came out, I think that was last week. Everything is like mushing together now. But
what is time?
Yeah, it's called Any Day with You. And this story is all about a 12-year-old girl. Her name is Kaya. And Kaya is a maker kid. She is into doing special effects makeup and making movies. And it takes place in the summertime in beachside Los Angeles. And she and her friends are enrolled in a summer camp, a movie making camp. And then there's a special person in Kaya's life, is her 90-year-old great grandpa. They call him Datang, which is a Filipino word for grandfather. And Datang makes an announcement to her family, and it basically turns her whole summer upside down. He announces that he's going back to his homeland of the Philippines after living in the United States for 40 years. And so she doesn't want him to say goodbye. She doesn't want him to go. And so she comes up with a plan to convince him to stay. And the plan involves she and her friends make a movie about this sea creature. It's called the Bakunawa, and it actually exists in different cultures. It's a sea serpent who eats all of the suns and moons, and that's what causes an eclipse. So they make this really fun movie about all the Filipino folklore that her grandpa loves to tell, and then they enter it into this citywide contest, thinking that if they win, it will stop him from saying goodbye. So it's got a ton of adventure. It's got a lot of kids doing things that they love, creative kids who have a passion, which I love writing about. And then there's a lot of very heartfelt moments with Tatang's storyline and sort of the relationship between them and how she discovers what a home is and what that means to her. And that's like the thing that I love about middle grade is that I think these books can cover any number of issues or topics, but somehow they always end in a lot of hope and they leave you feeling really good and inspired. And so that's what I hope this book brings to people. It's a really bright story. I've heard from people who've said, oh, it's made them laugh, but it also made them cry, which is like, I love hearing that. My goal is to make you laugh and cry. So yeah, that's what this book is. And it's out in the world already.
Yay.
Yay. So I think, what are we doing next?
think we're going to do some introductions
Yeah.
to some other folks.
Oh, yes. Okay. Sorry. My dog was biting me down here.
Yeah, because she wanted to be introduced.
She does. She's like, is it my time yet? So I'm going to try not to get it again, but we thought it would be fun to show who we are celebrating with. So this is my dog, Limka, and I got her when I lived in Los Angeles, and she's a rescue dog, and she's not like my childhood dog or any dog I've ever met because she doesn't like dogs, and she doesn't like cats, and she doesn't like people, and she doesn't like trees or anything. So she likes to be left alone. So I'm going to do that right now. But that's who I'm celebrating today. What about you, Ali? Who are you celebrating with?
So I'm getting one guess. So first I've got Miss Bella here. And Bella, she has been with me for 10 years. She's also a rescue dog that my husband and I adopted right out of college. And she is also, shameless book plug, she's also the inspiration for my third book, Bad Bella. I was so like, I just didn't understand how anybody could abandon such a great dog, because Bella, she does like people and she does like dogs, and she's so friendly and sweet. And so I wanted to try to fill in the blanks. So I wrote a story about how I thought she might have ended up with us. There's my other rascally dog, Keeper.
Aww.
Keeper is has a heart of gold, and we're working on his behavior. And here is our newest family member. This is Luca.
Hi, Luca.
Hi, Luca.
Don't hide. Don't hide. He's probably really interested because we do not usually let him look at the screen. So he's like, what's going on?
Magic.
Yes. What about you, Mae?
Boy, so we don't have dog. We're thinking about getting a dog, but right now we have.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
These are actual pet rats. This is Ube, who is named after a Filipino purple yam, and this is Popcorn. And these are kids. And do you guys want to tell them a little bit about Ube and Popcorn?
Oh.
Gail's freaking you guys out who's watching. Look at But they're super sweet. They're super smart. When we were trying to figure out, like, the boys wanted a gerbil or I don't know, a lizard, and we were kind of you didn't want a gerbil. We were trying to figure out a pocket pet to get, and we did all this research. And rats are super smart, and they're trained and they're potty trained, like, I don't know, 85% of the time, and they're just really sweet creatures. And I like to talk about them and show their pictures when I do school visits. And the kids always ask about the rats. So those are our two pets and my two boys. You want to say hi?
Hi.
I love you guys as rats. Are they like each loyal to one of you guys, or do you switch them back and forth?
No, we usually swap them back and forth there.
Oh.
Are they from the same litter?
They are, and you know, rats are very social creatures, so they need other rats to be with them, otherwise they get really depressed.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Domestic rat, you should get more than one, and so these guys are brothers, because they snuzzle with each other. They've got habits, and they just pile up together, and it's really sweet. But they do need each other. So, but if you saw this like running across the street, you'd probably freak out a little bit.
That's so awesome. Do you guys keep your pets around you when you're writing?
No.
I don't either.
They've got a big. And how about your pet? When you're reading, are your dogs good reading buddies? Do they lay next to you?
Bella is a great reading buddy. Keeper needs to be like zipping around all the time. So he's not a big snuggler.
Yeah, Limka likes to be by my feet when I'm reading.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, boys.
Bye,
Thank
guys.
you. Bye.
Before we go on to our next activity, just want to remind you guys to be commenting with your favorite book or what book you're reading, to be entered into our giveaway. And also we're going to have a few minutes at the end to do question and answer. So if you have any questions for any or all of us, just type those into the comments and we'll try to get to a few of those at the end too.
Yes, and I think we're going to play a little game, and we want you all at home to play along. We're going to do 2 truths and a lie. So I think a lot of you kids watching at home, you've probably played this in school. I know I like to do this during school visits. So we're going to do 2 truths and a lie about our books and our writing process. So I can just go first. Okay, number 1, sorry, let me gather my thoughts. So this book about Kaya, she's a maker kid. She loves to draw, she loves to sketch. And the truth or the lie is that my husband, actually you didn't see him on screen, did the tiniest bit of artwork for this book. So my editors and I decided, it would be fun to see some of Kaya's storyboards for the movie that she's making, and some of her sketchbooks and her little doodles. So long story, one of my first jobs out of college is I worked at the Disney Animation Studios. I worked in production, and I was an assistant to 2 directors. They're the guys who directed Little Mermaid, Aladdin, Moana, all these wonderful films. They are 2 of the most brilliant, warm, creative people I've ever known. And so that's where I met my husband. He was an artist working at Disney Animation. So he did, can you see that a little bit?
Yeah.
So the Bakunawa, and then there's like a little mermaid that Kaya draws. And then we combined the drawings with my handwriting to make it look like it was a 12-year-old girl who did them. So that's the first truth or lie, that my husband did some of the artwork. Okay, the second one is that this story has intergenerational themes. It sounds like yours does as well, Ali. And the truth or the lie is that I grew up with my grandparents living with me, and that very loosely inspired the relationships in this book. And then the third truth or lie is that, sorry, I keep looking over because my kids are like coming in and out of the room. Okay, the third truth or lie is that this is set at the beach, and my family and I, that's one of the things we love to do, is we love going to the beach. And so there was one day last summer, and my kids and I spent the whole day at the beach. We just had the best time, and we were so inspired that I came home, and that's how I started writing this book. And I wrote it within 48 hours. I was so excited by this wonderful day that I just took off and wrote the whole thing in less than a couple days. So which is the truth and which is, so 1, my husband did the artwork. 2, this is very loosely inspired by my own relationships growing up. And 3, I wrote the book in 48 hours.
I think for my own sanity, I have to believe that 3 is the lie. Because how could you write a book in 48 hours? If you did that, you are literally Superwoman. And I'm going to lock myself in a cave after this and see what I come up with after 48 hours.
What do you think, Supriya?
Yeah, I have a complex now, and I think it's 3. I'm hoping.
Yes, I am the slowest writer in the world. And so number 3 is obviously a lie. I did not write this book in 48 hours. It probably took maybe a year at least or longer. But yeah, so my husband did the artwork, and growing up, my grandparents lived with me, my family, for a little while, and they had a big influence on my life. And so this book is very loosely inspired by these real deep relationships I had with the older people in my life growing up.
Oh, that's so nice. I can't wait to read your book.
Thank you. I'd say it's my dream to write a book in 48 hours, but that's not
right.
Yeah. We wish it were that easy.
Yes. Who would like to go next? Ali, maybe?
Ali, you want to go?
Yeah. Okay. I wrote mine down so that I could not give it away by not forgetting what my lie was. Okay. So number 1, I lost the first draft of this book after my computer crashed before I had a chance to back it up. And after that incident, I came this close to not finishing this book. Number 2, this book shares its name with a nonfiction book, which is a how-to guide for how to fake your own death, disappear from your life, and start a new one without anyone knowing. And number 3, although this book is actually set in North Carolina, where I live now, the town of Lanternwood is actually basically a replica of a picturesque little village in England where my husband and I used to live.
What was number 1 again?
So 1 was I lost the first draft of this book when my computer crashed. 2, there's another book by this name that's a how-to guide for how to disappear from your life. And 3 is that it is set in North Carolina, but based on a town in England where I used to live.
So I'm going to guess the first one because it really scares me to think that you almost lost, or that you lost it and then almost didn't finish the book. So that's going to be my first guess.
I am also going to go with that. I remember I had the pleasure of reading this before it was published, and I don't remember that story. So I'm going to hope that's the lie.
You guys, we're just such honest people that we can't fool each other. Yes, number 1 is the lie, and like my worst nightmare, and I think every author's worst nightmare. I think all of us have had like either that happen or we've had like a scare where it almost happened. So yes, fortunately, that is a lie. There really is a book called How to Disappear Completely that is about how to fake your death and disappear. It was written in 1986 by Doug Richmond. Why he wrote that book, I don't know, but it has a lot of reviews on Amazon. So
did he try to fake his own death? And
I don't know, but I just think like if I were a person who was trying to do that, I probably wouldn't go on Amazon and like give it a review. And then number 3 is also true. I set this book in North Carolina because the South is really the place that I know how to write about the best. It's where I'm from. But my husband and I had lived in England for 3 years, and we lived in this like very sweet little village called Grantchester. There's actually a TV show that takes place there too. This is like a little postcard of the meadow and the river in our backyard. And so that was what I had in mind. It was so beautiful. It was like when you think about a quaint old English village with crumbling stone cottages and an old church with mossy gravestones, that was that village. And I really wanted to capture that in this book. So yeah.
And when you were writing, did you like keep a journal with descriptions, or did you just recall all of that from memory when you were working on the setting in your book?
Yeah, I could recall it all because it was just like such a tiny village. And when I was living there, it was just the 2 of us and Bella. And so every day, like 3 times a day, I would walk her around the whole village and really just like drink it all in, especially when I knew that we were going to be leaving. I was really like trying to etch those details into my memory. So hopefully I was able to do Grantchester proud.
Well, I haven't been there, but the setting is just gorgeous in your book, and it's so peaceful and like warm and full of love. So if that's it, I think you did it.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Goal achieved. Okay, Supriya, let's see if you're a better liar than me and Mae.
I also had to write mine down. So the first is that Leica finds paneer pie to be really too sweet for her taste in the beginning, and it takes her a while before she accepts it and likes it. The second is that this book is full of really bad puns because the main character, Leica, loves to make puns, and I'm a bad liar. And the third is that parts of the story are loosely based on my childhood growing up as one of the few Indian American kids in a small town in Michigan. So the first one is that paneer pie is too sweet for Leica at the beginning. The second is that the book is full of bad puns. And the third is that parts of the story are loosely based on parts of my life.
So I'm not familiar with paneer pie. Can you describe, so what is in it? What goes into it?
Well, it's part of the plot of it's part of the ending of the book.
Okay.
But there's paneer. And it's it's not a thing. So it's made up for the book.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to guess the first one. She thinks it's too sweet.
Okay, Allie, I know you read it, so you might.
It's been a while since I've read it, but I don't remember the puns. So I'm gonna say number 2.
All right, maybe I am a good liar, but it's number 1. It's
Oh, how do I not remember the pun?
So she actually doesn't come up with paneer pie until the end, and it's a savory dish. And there's a recipe in the back of the book that tells you how to make it, but it's a made up food, and it's kind of like a fusion dish of her 2 worlds.
Did you try making your own version of paneer pie when you were writing the book?
I did, yeah. Well, so without giving away what it is, it's fusiony, and my husband really always loved it. Like when we've had it at a fusion restaurant, and it was never really my thing, but it's grown on me now that I've made it at home so many times. So
you guys make it and eat it a lot.
Yeah, we had it yesterday.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I feel like your book is going to make me hungry when I read it.
I hope so. That was the goal.
So much creativity to come up with a book and a recipe.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Well, I hope some of you guys at home were able to spot the lies also. And then we thought next it might be fun to show you guys a little bit about where we work, or talk a little bit about our writing process, or both. So I can kick us off there. You can kind of see, this is my desk where I get some of my work done sometimes. So I'm gonna try to take you on a little tour of some of my favorite things. So basically I try to surround myself with things that inspire me and help me to remember like why I do what I do. Up here, all the way at the top, you can see these are the original Harry Potter books that I read when I was a kid. So I was 11 when the first Harry Potter book came out. So I really like grew up with Harry. And I have other versions, like newer copies of those books. I don't really read these anymore because they're so fragile, but I keep them because they're such a reminder of how magical that experience was when I read them for the first time. Like I can pick one up and just flip through the pages, and I'm instantly like back in that moment where I went to Hogwarts for the first time, or to Diagon Alley. And it reminds me of like why I write, because I want to be that book for somebody, that they open that up and they're just swept away into those pages. Let's see, up here in this corner, there are a small selection of all of my notebooks that I have written in since I was in elementary school.
Oh, wow.
And I keep those there as a reminder of the fact that writing is really a journey. Like I think a lot of times people think of writing as like, oh, I'm either good at writing or I'm not. And writing is a skill, just like basketball or playing flute or whatever, that you have to practice and practice. So those journals remind me of the journey that I've been on with writing, and the fact that, you know, I've been doing it for a long time and really working at it and working at it. So I want to keep working at it and keep getting better. And then I have a picture of myself as a kid, just to remind me of who I'm writing for, because it's always been my dream to be an author. And I like wish that I could invent a time travel machine and go back and tell myself that that dream was going to come true. So on days when I have writer's block, or I'm kind of feeling down or tired or frustrated, I look at that picture and I remember like why I write, and the fact that it's like really, really cool that I get to do my dream job. And then the last thing I'll show you, my husband had this made for me. It is a little drawing of the magical world that I invented in the 5th grade in my backyard. And that was the year that I read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe and Bridge to Terabithia. And they're both books about kids that go to fantasy worlds. In one, they get kind of sucked in, and in the other, they invent the world. And I got sick of waiting for my fantasy world, so I invented one. And I spent many afternoons in the backyard playing. And I, just like Emma, had a journal that I kept in the hollow of a tree there, where I would write down stories about the magic creatures that I imagined might live in the forest. And to my knowledge, that journal is still there. So $100,000 for anybody who finds that journal.
And did you illustrate that picture when you were young? Was the one that you just showed us?
No, so actually, I did this as part of when I lived in England. I did a master's degree in children's literature when we were in Cambridge, and part of the degree program, excuse Luca's getting a little fussy. It's almost bedtime. Part of that program was we had to write a paper about our own experiences growing up with children's literature and like the books that we read and how they impacted us. And so I wrote a lot about that experience. And Aki, my husband, who is a graphic design whiz, made that for me to put in with my paper.
Oh, that's so nice.
Yeah, it was like the coolest paper I ever got to write. Supriya, you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. So this is my writing space. It's kind of hard for me to, I've got a big computer here that I'm trying to maneuver. But behind me is a sari screen that my mom and I made together. Well, a friend made the wooden frame, and then we cut up a sari and sewed it on there. And I just like to keep it behind me as like a little touch of my background, and things that I wasn't necessarily proud of when I was growing up. So I like that there as a reminder. Like Mae, I come from a film background, so I generally write the way I was taught how to write screenplays. So I start, like, I'll do a lot of thinking about the story for several weeks before I even write anything down. And then I start with character journals where I sort of write diary entries or journal entries for all the big speaking parts in a screenplay or in a book. And through that, I get to find their characters' voices and their fears and their sort of their goals and their wishes. And so I have a bunch of notebooks where I handwrite those in. And once I get past that stage, I plot it out. I do an outline like you would for a screenplay in 3 acts, and then I start writing. So most of my writing is done in my head in the first few weeks when I'm thinking about a story, and then I write by hand for a lot, and then I switch over to the computer for the outline and the actual writing.
That's so cool. So for anyone who is out there and who's not a writer, a lot of times we talk about writers who are plotters and writers who are pantsers. Yeah. So writers who think through the plot first before they ever start writing, and then writers who fly by the seat of their pants and they just start writing and keep going and just see where the story takes them. And it definitely sounds like you are a plotter.
For sure. And I'm in complete awe of everyone who can do it the other way. I could never.
And does your outline change, or does your plot change very much as you're actually writing the story, or do you stick pretty true to the
I stick to it pretty much because I'll do a couple of drafts of the outline before I actually start writing. But when it comes to my editor, that's when things start to change. So, yeah, that's when we stray from the outline.
And what about you, Ali? Are you a plotter or a pantser or a combination?
So I like to say that I write the way that my parents drive. So maybe if you guys have parents of a certain age who are a little distrustful of technology and like to do it the old-fashioned way, they don't want to use the GPS. And they're like, no, I know where I'm going. And we take a few like wrong turns along the way, but we get there eventually. And I think that's how I am. Like I know where I want to start and I know where I want to go. And there's a few landmarks along the way that I can remember. And I take some twists and turns along the way. And sometimes they're right and sometimes they're wrong. And sometimes they're what I thought I was going to do. And sometimes they're unexpected. But usually that beginning and end stay the same. My dad is in the next room and he heard me say that. And now he is not happy with me. Mae, what about you?
Yeah, I love seeing where people write. That's always inspiring to me and always really fascinating. And both of your spaces look so bright and inspiring. So my husband and I actually share an office, and so it's like his stuff versus my stuff. And my boys thought, so this is like one of the things that like stares me in the face when I'm writing, because my husband, as an artist, he uses things like this to draw facial features and bodies and things like that. So I often end up here in my dining room rather than writing in my office, because I've got the table and I can spread out all of my stuff, and then I can sort of see my kids from where I am if they need me. but here, let me show you. This is sort of my process for writing. This is not for Any Day With You, but this I did this for my next book, which comes out hopefully in 2021 next year. So I'm a combination pantser plotter. I used to be a pantser, where, I just sort of would let the characters guide me. And, as I got to know the characters, I would figure out what choices they're making. And that's sort of how I wrote each scene. But I think once you start working with a publisher and you have deadlines, that was sort of the turning point for me in becoming more of a plotter, because I needed to just get things done within a certain timeline, because if I'm pantsing it, I can just go on and on and on, and I'll never have an end point. So for the book I'm working on now, I started off, I do a very general 3-act structure, and I start off on Post-its, and this is my outline. And I used to do this on the wall, but then, Post-its, especially in a house with 2 boys who are running around, they like go flying all over the place. I think it was author Melanie Conklin, who also has a book coming out soon, Every Missing Piece. She said, well, why don't you just do it on one of those tri-fold boards, because then it's portable and you can like put it away and you don't have to look at it. And so I was like, brilliant, that was perfect. Wow. So it's like my system now. I used to do this on the wall, or in notepads, but now I do it on here. And then this allows me to sort of move scenes around, and I get a visual of what my character's arc is, and I can sort of see like where things are heavy or where I need to pull certain scenes. So that is normally how I start off. And then, as all writers will know, then that's when I start going through all my different drafts. And for me, I print out every draft. So this was my draft before I actually, for Any Day With You, before I sent it to my editors, Dana Carey and Wendy Lamb. And so, it's got a calendar because I needed to figure out the timeline. It's got all my Post-it notes and all my scribbles. So this was pretty much, I think, my first draft. And then I sent this off to them at the publisher, to my editors. And then that sort of begins the process of back and forth. So I had a lot of drafts with my editors. This is, one draft. I start off pretty lean in my writing. I don't know if you're both the same way, and my writing expands. I know there are a lot of writers who they just write a ton of words and then they have to pull back and trim. But mine starts really lean and then it gets bigger. How about you both? Do you cut a lot or do you add a lot?
I have to cut a lot.
Yeah, I think my word counts don't tend to change that much, but like the content changes. Mm-hmm. So I would say like from the first draft that I do to the last draft, maybe 50% of the content is the same. And the first draft that I'll send to my editor, maybe like a quarter of the content will change after that. But I think I think people oftentimes think about writing as like a very solitary thing that we do by ourselves, and they don't realize that we have these teams, agents and editors, who are giving us this feedback and helping us to make our stories better, just like a lot of students might do like peer editing in their classrooms. And sometimes I think like I meet with young writers who think it's like cheating to ask for help on a story or to ask for ideas or get input or feedback. And it's so not, because, working with an editor, hi, Ali, my editor is also named Ali, Allison Day. It's so great because it's someone else who's really, really interested and invested in your story and who is just trying to help you to make it better. So we haven't gotten to like the advice section, but that is definitely one of my biggest pieces of advice, is to find that like support system. Supriya is one of where we read each other's manuscripts, and that is always so amazing to get that feedback. So I think getting feedback from those people who believe in you and understand your vision is a really, really important of my process. And I think all authors' processes, really.
I think so too. And writing for me in the beginning stages is very solitary. I mean, it's you figuring out your words on a blank page and trying to figure out how to make them work. And that can be a little harrowing sometimes, but I do love the editorial process when you're just bouncing ideas back and forth. And you're right, you have other people who love the story and are invested in it, who help make it that much stronger. And I really, that's a fun part of the process for me. So we have so much fun that there are even more. And then finally, you get to sort of the final stages of the book. And I think these are called past pages, right? Where the layout is pretty final. It's hard to make any changes at this point, but this is sort of the first time an author might hold her book and it looks like a real book. So, obviously without the binding, but it's all laid out with the chapter headings. And you can read it and just make sure, that it flows and that there's nothing else that you want to change. So that's sort of my process. And it's been interesting, with the more I write, the stack gets a little bit smaller, I think. My first book, my stack was like half my height. So, it's an interesting process to go through these drafts and to, really learn how to put a story into 250 pages. So that is my process.
Yeah, and then I think we thought it would be fun to share a couple lines from our books and talk about their significance. So I'm going to share 2 lines that are very different and both are from the first chapter of American as Veneer Pie. The first line is the very first line of chapter 1. And it says, "It's funny how something as small as a dot could matter so much, but it did." And this line is, it's Lekha talking about her birthmark, which is right over here where a bindi would be. And to her, she's talking about the bindi, but it's also a metaphor for all the microaggressions and othering that she's heard her whole life, and how, when you hear them enough, they start to really build up until they can break you if you don't find another way. And then the other line is a few pages later, and it has to do with my 2 truths and a lie. It's, "You don't want me to make puns on porpoise." And that's porpoise instead of purpose. And Lekha likes to make really bad puns around an aquatic theme because her best friend Noah is a budding journalist, and he finds puns to be in really poor taste and just not good writing. And so she likes to do make these puns just to sort of get on his nerves a little bit. So what about you, Mae? Did you want to share a couple of
So your character Noah would not like my books because I love puns. My books are pun filled.
Yes.
Let me just read the line I chose, and I'll tell you why I chose it. So it's toward the beginning, and it's when Kaya and her family go to the beach. "Among these people, I'm a dot and nothing more. I imagine a movie camera looking down on me, then zooming out, 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 as wide and far as it can go until it reaches 1,000,000 miles away, and I dissolve into a small blue marble, the earth." So I love that line because it felt like a really true middle grade voice to me. That's something that for me as a writer, writing for kids can sometimes be a challenge, is capturing that right voice and that right tone of a 12-year-old girl. And so for me, Ali, you were talking about your journals. I have a lot of my journals still from when I was in middle school and in high school. I look at those sometimes to just sort of remember what that voice is. And I loved that line because it says something about Kaya. It talks about how she loves making movies. I love the visual of it where she's kind of picturing the earth, and it's like getting smaller and smaller as the camera zooms out. And so I just thought that was a really true line that speaks to her voice and what her voice is.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you use those journals. I think that's a good reminder and lesson for any young writers watching, that maybe the first thing that you write, the first story or the first batch of poems or whatever, maybe that's not the thing that gets published, but none of that is wasted material. All of that, those are ideas that you're putting into this pot of things in your head that just simmers away until you go and take it back out again. So, and Supriya, I had totally forgotten. I remember this now, but will you read your first line again?
Yeah, it's funny how something as small as a dot could matter so much, but it did.
And the first line of How to Disappear Completely is, the spot appears on the morning of Graham's funeral.
Right.
And totally different, spot and dot, but it's just so
Yeah.
interesting. And that gave me goosebumps remembering that our lines
right.
had that in common. So I'm going to read 2 lines from a later chapter. These are things that that Emma imagines her Graham might say to her. And there are things that I think that I'm thinking a lot about right now, because I think they're very relevant to the moment that we're all living in. Before I read them, I just want to say one last reminder. We'll go to Q&A next. I know we have some questions already. If you have a question and haven't asked it yet, now is your chance to do that. So my 2 lines are, imagination is one of the greatest gifts we have. If we build it up strong enough, it can be anything we need it to be: a home, a friend, a whole entire world. And I really like that line right now, because I think all of us have lost so much in our lives in the past few weeks, like so many things that we took for granted as normal. A lot of us feel like we've lost friends or family because we can't see them, our hobbies, the places that we used to go. But imagination is something that this pandemic cannot take from you. And so when I do school visits now, virtual visits, I encourage kids to use your imagination whenever you can, even if it's just to close your eyes for a minute a day and imagine yourself somewhere different, to bust out of these 4 walls that all of us have been sitting in and looking in for so long. And then the second line is, the battles we fight always change us. When we're fighting them, all we can see is how they wound us, but they change us for the better too. So that's something that Emma learns throughout the course of processing all these changes that she is going through, is that we can find strength in our struggles. And I think we can all find strength in this moment that we're going through right now too. Something like this event, it's tough to not be able to celebrate in our communities with the people that we love and that we would usually see in person, but also like how cool to get to connect with both of you guys and celebrate together, and to celebrate with everybody who's watching at home all around the country and maybe even in other countries. So, there are really good things that we can draw from this moment too.
Oh, definitely. And celebrating with books too. I know that's one of the things that has sort of gotten me through just being at home, is reading with my kids and reading for myself. We need books and stories right now, and it just feels good to escape or have entertainment or to laugh or to cry through stories. And so I've really appreciated having books in my life during this time.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, are we ready for a Q&A?
I think so.
All right, let me get our question master. He's writing down one last one.
Thanks, Aki.
Yeah, thank you.
And then we will...
I'll bring some more.
Okay, and then we'll do our giveaway after the question. So if you have not told us your name and what book you're reading, or your favorite book, or whatever book pops into your head, go ahead and do that now to be entered into that giveaway. Okay. So let's see. We have many questions. Let's start with a question from Melissa. What do you hope readers take from your stories?
Do you want to start? Or?
Sure, I can go. So, what I hope people take from my books is I aim to write books with a lot of hope and a lot of heart. And I think I said this earlier, is that I love middle grade fiction because it just shows that you can sort of get through anything, whatever is in your life. And I love that middle grade features characters who are learning about their worlds, their communities, and learning how to stay true to themselves. I think that's something that I could have used a little bit more of when I was growing up, is having stories like that, because books they're transformative. They often inform our experiences and how we see ourselves. And so when kids read my books, I hope that they find a little bit of strength to figure out their own worlds and to go on their own journeys. And how about you both?
Yeah, I like you, for American as Veneer Pie, I hope that I hope that it provides hope for children. I hope that it empowers them to find their voice. And I hope it reminds them that not everybody's voice is necessarily your voice. I know when I was in middle school, I would not have ever been able to speak up to the people who would tease me for my culture. So your voice can take the form of whatever is best suited for you, whether it's writing or dance or art or poetry. You know, there's so many different ways you can find your voice. So I really hope that this book inspires kids to find their voice, and I hope it provides hope and joy to those who need it. What about you, Ali?
Yeah, I think you guys really said everything. Hope, definitely. Empowerment. I think most of the kids that I write about in my books, or there's always a character in my books who is a storyteller. And I always want to have that character in because I always want to encourage kids to tell their own stories, and know that their own voices are important, no matter what voices they might have around them telling them that they're not. And then I want to provide that experience that when you open the book, everything around you fades away and you're able to just disappear completely and sink into the comfort of those pages.
That's the best feeling.
It's the best feeling, the best. And especially when you're a kid, I think I still love reading, but it's not quite the same experience as it was when I was a middle grade reader. So let's see. Sadia asks, who is your favorite secondary character in each of your books?
Ooh.
So I love Datang's character because he's just like this kooky 90-year-old guy, and he wears Hawaiian shirts and he just is really eccentric. So he was just a lot of fun to dream up. So you know, this book was a little bit loosely inspired by my own relationships with my grandparents growing up, but they were nothing like Datang. He's just this really fun dude to be around. So I think he was my favorite. How about you both? How about you, Supriya?
So I really liked the character of Avantika, who is the new neighbor who moves in across the street from Lekha and she's just moved in from India. And she is so proud of who she is, and she really inspires Lekha to speak up for herself and to speak out against hate. And she has her own flaws too. She has something that she's you know, uncomfortable with that she has to overcome as well. But I think she's just a really big inspiration for Lekha and not at all the person that Lekha thought she was. What about you, Ali?
Yeah, I am like caught between both of your answers. I love Fina, who's the best friend that Emma meets in my story, because she's like the champion and the more outgoing one, who is able to push Emma through this thing that she's going through and to help convince her that there is going to be another side, that she's not going to disappear. And then I love the character of Graham because she is very eccentric. She is very mysterious. She's kind of like this puzzle that Emma is trying to solve. At the beginning of the book, Emma feels like she knows her really well, and then she kind of feels like, actually, maybe there's some things that I didn't understand, and then she comes to understand Graham in a different way. And I was really close with my grandmother growing up. She was a very different type of grandmother than Graham, but I love a good grandparent, and I love writing them too. Older people are just so wise. Okay, let's see.
Hang out someday.
Yeah. Life goals. Okay, let's see. Carly wants to know, I think this comes from Mae's answer. What is the fastest that any of you have written a book?
Oh gosh. I think so. My current book, it's the title right now is called Everything Starts with Nothing. It's about a group of 6th grade slime kids, and they start a slime ring at school. And then the deeper story is that it's about this boy and his father and their expectations of each other and how that changes as he builds his business. So I wrote that draft of that book in about 4 months, which was really fast for me. But after 4 months, I just had this like mess of words, and I didn't really quite know how they all fit together or how they would fit together. And then that's really where the revision process kicks in, and where you can really dig deep into your characters and into their arc and figure out how to make things work. But as far as like just a pure draft, it was 4 months for me. And how about you both?
My last 2 novels have like the 2 extremes of that. So I wrote Ahimsa in 2003, the very first draft of it, and it was pretty terrible, and I set it aside. And every year between working for a Bollywood film director, I would go to India, and then I would come back and be like, what am I going to do right now? And I would remember that Ahimsa exists, and I would take it out and throw out characters. So that went on for 13 years. And the book finally got to a good place in 2015, and it sold in 2016, and it came out in 2017. So that was a 14-year process of writing.
Wow.
Yeah, for Veneer Pie, for American as Veneer Pie, I wrote it in 5 weeks, and that's the fastest I've ever written a book. And I feel like because it was contemporary and I felt that story so deeply, it just sort of all clicked. And I've never had that really happen before. So I'm back to taking a long time for writing drafts, but this one was fast for me.
So for Ahimsa, every time you went back to it over the course of those years, did you feel like the story was, had changed, or you needed to change it more, or were you able to keep some consistent flow, among years?
I think the only thing that remained is the first chapter. So everything else like totally changed, and characters were thrown out completely. So it was a pretty drastic change over the decade and a half.
And how about you, Ali?
I think the fastest was The Ethan I Was Before, which was my debut novel. And I wrote that one, the first draft, in about 6 weeks. I had just moved to England, and I had been working as a teacher in Washington, D.C. before, but I couldn't do that in England. So I didn't have a job. I didn't have any friends. I literally had nothing else to do, but I had this dream for this book, and I sat down and I wrote it as quickly as I could, because I had a really clear vision, and I wanted to get that draft down on paper before those voices of doubt had time to really get into my head and tell me like, this isn't actually that great of a story, or you're not good enough to write this story. And I try to write my first drafts as quickly as possible for that reason, to kind of outrun those voices of doubt. But I think 6 weeks was about the fastest. All right, a few more questions before we wrap up. Emily wants to know, what book has influenced you most as a writer, or perhaps inspired you to become a writer? I'll go first with that one. I think there's a few. I loved Bridge to Terabithia by Catherine Patterson, and I loved Walk Two Moons by Sharon Creech. Those were 2 of my very, very favorites growing up. And both of those books were really about like these really adult experiences of love and loss, things that I hadn't necessarily experienced so deeply. And I think I was really drawn to reading books about those things because I knew those were coming for me later in my life. And in a way, reading these books was like a safe space to explore those issues and to kind of prepare me for those things down the road that life was going to hold. And I also just loved the characters, and they were books that just felt like they like climbed into my heart, and my heart like grew back around them. So I still think about those books all the time.
So I think for me, there's a book called America is in the Heart that was written, well, I'll just go back. So when I was growing up, I was a huge bookworm, but there really weren't any books that reflected who I was or my family. And when I became a mom, I thought, okay, maybe things have changed. I'm going to start building my little bookshelf library for my kids. And I set out to find books with Filipino characters in them. And still, there really wasn't anything. Things have changed. Luckily, my older son is 12 now, and there are more voices that reflect him and his family. But the first book I ever saw myself in was America's in the Heart. It's it's half memoir, written by Carlos Bulusan, and it was his experiences growing up as a migrant, not growing up, but working in America as a migrant farm worker. And it was really the first time, I think I read that book in college, that I ever recognized any piece of my culture or of myself. And I think it's appropriate to mention that because it's Asian Pacific American Heritage Month right now. And so that's the book I always think back on of, wow, there can be stories there that have my voice in them and have things that reflect me and what I care deeply about and my family. So that was the first book for me that really, I thought, oh, we need stories like that, because I had never really thought until that point about not having those kinds of stories. But when you recognize yourself in a book for the first time, that's a really powerful moment. So that was my book. And how about you, Supriya?
Yeah, I'm always a little stumped with it when I get this question, but I, like you, May, I never saw myself in a book growing up. But my aunt and uncle, for all the Hindu holidays, had given me a subscription to a Book of the Month club for several years. This was in the pre-Amazon days, so it was like so cool to get this cardboard box and get 3 books each month. And that went on for several years. So I ended up getting hundreds of books over the course of my childhood from them like that. And I still have every single one of those books. My kids read them now. And I just remember, like, I was a bookworm, so I would read them over and over and over again. But I was actually more inspired by Bollywood to become a writer because, there were no books with South Asian American characters in them growing up. And that was the first time where I was seeing, not that my story is singing and dancing, but, to see yourself reflected, it made me want to be a writer.
Great. Okay, so we are at just after 6, so we should start wrapping up. We'll do one last question, and then we will announce our giveaway winners. So this is I'll let you guys choose. You can do both or one. So Sadia's child wants to know what part of your story is your favorite. So you can tell us either that about your current book, or Ali wants to know about our next books.
Ooh.
So my favorite part of Any Day with You is when they make their movie, because it's just like the really kid fun adventure part where they just, it's just 3 kids and a movie camera, and they're, tromping around Los Angeles filming these really funny scenes. So that was just a lot of fun, right? And there's actually, screenplay pages in the book where we get to see what their screenplay looks like. And then my next book, I mentioned it a little bit, but hopefully comes out next year. And it's all about, it's got a lot of S's. It has slime, soccer, and savvy 6th graders. And how about you both?
So my favorite part of American as Veneer Pie is when Leica goes to a sleepover, and she's asked to shave so that the swimming team can shave off seconds off their time and win. And it's a moment where all the decisions Leica has made to sort of fit in really confront her. And I love the drama in that scene. My next book in fall of this year, I have another historical fiction novel coming out called Strong as Fire, Fierce as Flame. And that takes place in 1857 in India, so almost 100 years before Ahimsa. And that sort of challenges who we center in so-called classics that are from the period of colonization. So I'm excited for that. What about you, Ali? Oh, sorry?
That's middle grade as well?
Yes, that's middle grade, yeah.
That's awesome. I'm very awed by your research skills.
Oh.
Let's see. I always like writing the spooky parts of my book. So there's always a part of my book that takes place in like a spooky house or a graveyard. This book has both. So I love writing those scenes. And the book that I'm working on right now is called The Mending Summer. It will be out sometime in 2021. I can't remember off the top of my head. And it is about a girl who is growing up in a home with an alcoholic father. And she is sent for the summer to stay with her great aunt Marigold. And she's staying out in the country, and there's a lake in the woods behind her aunt's house. And she goes to this lake and meets a friend there. And together they discover that this lake has some magical properties and seems to have the ability to grant wishes. And she hopes that she can use the lake's magic to fix everything that's happening in her family and to help her father. But the magic is much more complicated than that. So, yeah. Okay, cool. Well, thank you guys so much for all the questions. I'm sorry we didn't have a chance to get to them all. I know I have a website, alistandish.com, with a contact form that you can fill out anytime. And let me know if you have a question and I will get back to you. Mae, Supriya, you guys probably have a way for readers to get in touch with you guys as well.
Same, yeah.
Yeah, same on my website. Yep.
Okay.
We will take some of the questions too, and we can tweet them out later and answer some of them in the future. So
Yes, yes. And Aki informs me that we can also comment and reply to them on the YouTube page. So we will do some of that too. All right. So for our giveaway, out of my sweet little baby hat that my baby has outgrown. Okay. First name is.
Which one are we drawing for first?
Ooh, good question. Let's see. Let's do Meg since she asked. So this person will be the proud recipient of Any Day with You. And that is Sharon Sawyers.
Yay, Sharon!
Who is currently reading When You Trap a Tiger by Tay Keller, which is an amazing, amazing novel.
Heard so many good things about that book. And Sharon, so if you just go to my website, there's a contact me form, and then just send me your information, and then I will send this book out to you. Thank you for being here and for joining us today.
All right. And let's see, we'll draw for Supriya next. So American as Paneer Pie. And the winner of that is Erica Wilmer, I believe. My husband's handwriting isn't great, so it could be Vilmer, but I think it's Wilmer, who is reading Ghost Squad.
Oh, another good one.
Oh, I haven't read that one. Have you?
I'm
or maybe it just came out.
Yeah, there's the audiobook's out right now, so I was listening to it with my kids. We're about halfway through.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Well, congrats. And the same thing, I have a contact link on my website, and you can just send me an email there with your address and I will get it out to you.
All right. And our last winner, who will be getting a copy of How to Disappear Completely, is Ruthie Lazenberry, who is reading The Prophet Calls. Has anybody read that one?
Oh, I did. By Melanie Sumrow, I think. Yeah, that's a good book.
Awesome. Okay, yep. And Ruthie, same thing, alistandish.com, or you can just email me at alistandishbooks@gmail.com.
All right, so I guess we are done here, and we want to thank you all so much for joining us and celebrating all these amazing books with us. You can order or pre-order, in my case, our books through your local independent bookstore and also through bookshop.org. And I think Ali has signed copies at hers. Which store is that?
Yep. So my local indie, which I love, Quail Ridge Books, has signed copies if you are interested in a signed copy, and they're shipping all over the country for free right now. So it would be the same price as any indie bookstore.
All right. And Mae, did you have a preferred bookstore in your
Yeah, so my local indie is Book Passage. I'm not able to do personalized copies right now, but hopefully soon when things kind of pick up again. But any independent bookstore is always wonderful to support, especially during these times. So
yeah, now and always.
We definitely want to send them some love. And same with me. Bookbug in Kalamazoo has signed copies, but I can also send you a signed book plate anytime. You can just email me if you'd like that. And I think that's about it. So we just want to thank you all so much. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, thank you guys for helping us launch our books into the world.
Okay, congratulations, everybody, and thank you all for joining us.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.